Right now, in supermarkets across the entire planet, there is a fruit sitting in the produce aisle that should not exist. It has no seeds. It cannot reproduce on its own. Every single one of them is genetically, very nearly a perfect clone of the next, as identical as if you photocopied the same fruit billions of times over. It is, in a very real sense, one of the most unnatural things you can buy in a grocery store. And it is also the most popular fruit in the world. It is the banana. And the banana you are picturing right now, yellow, sweet, curved, seedless, reliable, is the product of one of the strangest and most troubling stories in the history of food. It is a story that involves the overthrow of governments, private armies, massacres, a fruit company so powerful it effectively owned entire countries, and a slow-motion extinction that is happening right now as you watch this, and that may mean the banana you know will vanish within your lifetime. The banana looks like the most innocent thing in the world, a cheerful, cheap, wholesome fruit you put in a child's lunchbox. But behind that friendly yellow peel is a history of empire and control and violence so dark that a phrase was invented to describe the nations it consumed. We still use that phrase today, usually as an insult, almost always without knowing where it came from. The phrase is Banana Republic, and by the end of this, you will understand exactly what it means and why it is far more sinister than it sounds. So here is the question. How did a seedless, cloned fruit from the jungles of Southeast Asia become the most eaten fruit on Earth, powerful enough to topple presidents and reshape whole nations? And why is the banana you eat today living on borrowed time? To understand all of it, we have to start with the strangest fact of all. The fact that the banana, as you know it, is a kind of beautiful mistake. The wild ancestors of the banana grew in the region of Southeast Asia and the islands of the Pacific many thousands of years ago. And if you have never seen a wild banana, you would barely recognize it. Wild bananas are short, often stubby, and above all they are packed with seeds. Big, hard, black seeds, so many of them that there is barely any flesh to eat. Biting into a truly wild banana is less like eating a fruit and more like biting into a pod full of little rocks. It is not the soft, sweet, seedless thing you know at all. The banana we eat exists because, thousands of years ago, people in Southeast Asia noticed that very occasionally, a banana plant would produce fruit with no viable seeds. Soft, edible, sweet fruit. Naturally, those were the ones people wanted. But here is the catch, and it is the key to the entire story. A banana with no seeds cannot reproduce. It is sterile. It is a genetic dead end. So how do you grow more of a plant that cannot make seeds? The answer is that you clone it. Banana plants can grow from shoots, offshoots, that sprout from the base of the parent plant. Cut off a shoot, plant it, and it grows into a new banana plant that is genetically identical to its parent. So every seedless, edible banana in human history has been propagated this way, not from seed, but from cuttings, one clone giving rise to the next, over and over, for thousands of years. When you eat a banana, you are eating fruit from a plant that is, in effect, a genetic copy of a plant that a farmer chose to propagate long ago. The banana did not evolve to be the way it is. Humans made it this way, by choosing sweetness and seedlessness over the ability to reproduce, and then keeping it alive artificially ever since. That single decision, to trade the banana's natural reproduction for our convenience, is the original source of everything that follows, including its coming doom. But we will get to that. Bananas spread slowly across the ancient world, carried by traders and travelers from Southeast Asia into India, into Africa, and eventually to the Americas. For most of history, though, the banana was a strictly regional food. It was grown and eaten in the tropics, where it thrived, and it was almost unknown in the temperate world of Europe and North America. The reason is simple. Bananas are fragile and they spoil fast. A ripe banana bruises easily, rots quickly, and cannot survive a long journey. For most of history, if you did not live where bananas grew, you would very likely never see one in your life. As late as the 1800s, in Europe and the United States, the banana was an exotic curiosity, a rare, expensive novelty that most people had never tasted. When bananas were displayed at a major exhibition in the United States in the 1870s, they were sold as a luxury, individually wrapped in foil, an unfamiliar treat that people ate with a knife and fork because they did not even know how to approach one. The idea that the banana would become the cheapest, most common fruit in the Western world would have seemed absurd. So what changed? How did a fragile, exotic luxury become a cheap, everyday staple, stacked in every supermarket? The answer is a combination of technology, ambition, and ruthlessness. And it is where the banana's story turns dark. The transformation came in the late 1800s, driven by a handful of American businessmen who saw an opportunity. If you could solve the problem of getting bananas from the tropics to northern cities before they rotted, there was a fortune to be made, because the fruit grew cheaply and abundantly in Central America and the Caribbean, and there was a vast, untapped market of hungry consumers to the north. The key was speed and infrastructure, fast steamships, refrigeration, and above all, railroads, to move the fruit from inland plantations to the ports. Companies formed to do exactly this, and over time, they consolidated into a few giant enterprises. The most powerful of them all became known as the United Fruit Company. And the United Fruit Company would go on to become one of the most powerful and most feared corporations in the history of the world. Here is how it worked, and here is where you need to pay close attention, because this is the heart of the whole story. To grow bananas at the scale these companies wanted, you needed enormous amounts of land in Central American countries, countries like Guatemala, Honduras, Costa Rica, and others. You needed railroads to move the fruit. You needed ports. You needed a cheap, controllable workforce. And so these fruit companies did not simply buy bananas from local farmers. They moved in and took control of entire economies. The United Fruit Company acquired vast tracts of land across Central America, often far more than it actually farmed, holding the rest in reserve and out of the hands of locals. It built and owned the railroads. It owned the ports. It owned the telegraph lines and the shipping fleets. In many places, it controlled the flow of goods, the jobs, and the money. Entire towns existed to serve the company. And because these Central American nations were often small, poor, and politically unstable, the company's economic power translated directly into political power. When you control a country's largest employer, its main export, its railroads, and its ports, you control the country. Governments that cooperated with the company were supported. Governments that threatened its interests by, for example, trying to tax it fairly or to give land to their own people, could find themselves undermined, opposed, or removed. This is the origin of that phrase, Banana Republic. A small, poor nation whose economy and government were dominated and effectively controlled by a foreign corporation growing a single cash crop. The term sounds almost comical today, a mild insult about a chaotic country. But its true meaning is far darker. A banana republic was a country whose sovereignty had been quietly hollowed out and handed to a fruit company. The people lived and worked under the power of a corporation headquartered in another country, a corporation whose only real interest in their nation was the cheap fruit that could be extracted from its soil. If you're finding this as gripping as I am, take 1 second to hit subscribe. The Tiny Grand uncovers the grand hidden history of a tiny everyday thing every single week. Now, the story of the banana is about to go from ruthless business to something much darker. The power of the fruit companies was not just economic. At times, it was enforced with violence, and it reached all the way into the foreign policy of powerful nations. One of the darkest single episodes took place in Colombia in 1928. Workers on the banana plantations, laboring in brutal conditions for low pay, went on strike, demanding better treatment. Basic things, like written contracts and being paid in actual money rather than company vouchers. The response was catastrophic. The government, under pressure and fearful of the economic consequences of angering such a powerful foreign company, sent in the army. Soldiers opened fire on the gathered workers. The number of dead has been debated ever since, with estimates ranging widely, but many were killed in what became known as the Banana Massacre. It became one of the most infamous events in the country's history, a symbol of the deadly cost of the banana trade. A moment so haunting that it was later immortalized in one of the most celebrated novels ever written in Latin America. And the reach of the fruit companies extended even further, into the direct overthrow of a national government. In Guatemala, in the early 1950s, a democratically elected government began a program of land reform. The idea was to take unused land, including vast tracts held in reserve by the United Fruit Company, and redistribute it to poor, landless farmers so they could grow their own food. To the government, it was a matter of basic justice. To the United Fruit Company, it was an intolerable threat. The company launched an enormous lobbying and public relations campaign in the United States, framing the Guatemalan government as a dangerous communist threat during the tense early years of the Cold War. In 1954, backed by the United States, a coup overthrew Guatemala's elected government. The land reform was reversed, the company's holdings were protected, and Guatemala was plunged into decades of instability and civil conflict that would cost an enormous number of lives. Think about the enormity of that. A fruit company, unhappy about a plan to give farmland to poor farmers, played a central role in the overthrow of an entire nation's elected government, and got its way. That is the true, full meaning of Banana Republic. That is the power, a single cheap fruit, concentrated into the hands of those who controlled it. When you peel a banana, you are holding the descendant of a trade that was once powerful enough to topple presidents. But while all of this was happening on the surface, the empires, the massacres, the coups, a quieter danger had been lurking in the banana itself the entire time. And it stemmed directly from that ancient decision to make the banana a seedless clone. Here is the problem with an army of clones. Because every commercial banana of a given type is genetically almost identical, they all share the exact same strengths and, crucially, the exact same weaknesses. If a disease appears that can kill one of them, it can kill all of them. There is no genetic variation, no lucky individual with natural resistance that might survive and carry on. A field of cloned bananas is not really a population of individuals. It is one single organism, copied 1 billion times, all equally vulnerable to the same threat. And a monoculture like that is a disease's dream come true. For the first half of the 20th century, the banana that the fruit companies grew and shipped and sold, the banana that built the empires, was not actually the one you eat today. It was a variety called the Gros Michel, known as Big Mike. By many accounts, the Gros Michel was superior to the modern banana, bigger, sweeter, more flavorful, with a tougher peel that made it easier to ship without bruising. For decades, Big Mike was the banana. It was what banana meant. And then it began to die. A fungal disease known as Panama disease, a soil-borne fungus that attacks the banana plant and chokes it from within, began spreading through the plantations of Central America in the early 20th century. Because the Gros Michel bananas were all clones, all genetically identical, they were all equally defenseless. The fungus tore through them. It could not be stopped with chemicals. It lived in the soil for years, so infected land could not simply be replanted. The companies responded by abandoning ruined plantations and clearing new land elsewhere, fleeing the disease. But the fungus kept spreading, following them, and land ran out. By the 1950s and into the 1960s, Panama disease had devastated the Gros Michel on a massive scale across the growing regions of the world. The banana that had built a global empire was being driven, commercially, toward extinction. The industry was facing catastrophe, and it was saved, at the last moment, by a replacement, a different variety of banana that happened to be resistant to that particular strain of the fungus. It was smaller, less flavorful, and more easily bruised than Big Mike, which meant it required more careful handling. But it was immune to the disease that was killing the Gros Michel, and it could survive the journey to market. So the industry pivoted, tore out the dying Gros Michel, and replanted the world with this new variety. Its name was the Cavendish. And the Cavendish is the banana you eat today. Every ordinary yellow banana you have ever bought in a supermarket is, almost certainly, a Cavendish. It became the banana not because it was the best. By most accounts, the banana we lost was better, but because it was the one that survived when the previous champion died. Your banana is a replacement, a runner-up that got the job because the star performer was wiped out by a plague. Now, here is where the story becomes not just history, but a warning about the future. Because everything that happened to the Gros Michel is beginning to happen again to the Cavendish. The Cavendish, remember, is also a clone. Every Cavendish banana on Earth is genetically nearly identical to every other one. It is exactly as vulnerable as the Gros Michel was. It just happened to be immune to the old strain of the fungus. But nature does not stand still. A new strain of Panama disease has emerged, a variant known as Tropical Race 4, and this one can kill the Cavendish. It has been spreading across banana-growing regions of the world, appearing in Asia, then Africa, then reaching the Americas. Like the original, it lives in the soil. It cannot be easily killed, and against a monoculture of identical clones, it has no natural obstacle. Scientists have watched it advance with a growing sense of dread because they have seen this movie before. They know exactly how it ends, because it already ended once, for Big Mike. The banana industry is, in effect, living through a slow-motion rerun of the exact catastrophe it barely survived last century. And this time, there is no obvious Cavendish waiting in the wings, no perfect resistant replacement already identified and ready to plant. Researchers are racing to find solutions, breeding new resistant varieties, using genetic modification, searching the wild relatives of the banana for resistance. But it is a genuine race against time, against a disease that has already proven it can bring the mightiest banana of its age to its knees. So the banana in your fruit bowl right now sits in a strange and precarious place in history. It is the most popular fruit on the planet, grown by the billions, cheap and abundant, and utterly taken for granted. And it is, at the same time, a fragile clone facing down a spreading plague that has already killed its predecessor, a fruit that may, within a generation, change beyond recognition or disappear from your supermarket in its current form entirely. So why the banana? Why did this one fruit gather around itself such an outsized history of empire, violence, and looming disaster? The answer lies in that single ancient choice, the choice to make the banana a seedless clone. That decision made the banana convenient, sweet, and reliable, and it made it possible to grow the exact same fruit at enormous industrial scale, which is what allowed a few companies to build empires on it. But that very same decision, sameness, uniformity, control, is also its fatal weakness. 1 billion identical clones can be shipped and sold with perfect consistency, and 1 billion identical clones can also be wiped out by a single disease, all at once, with nowhere to hide. The banana's greatest strength and its greatest vulnerability are the same thing. We engineered it for our convenience, and in doing so we built into it the seeds, if you will forgive the word, of its own recurring destruction. And there is a deeper lesson buried in the banana peel, one that goes beyond fruit. The banana is what happens when we prize control and uniformity and cheapness above resilience. A wild forest, full of genetic variety, can absorb a disease and survive because some individuals will always resist. A field of clones cannot. In our determination to make nature convenient, predictable, and profitable, we sometimes strip out the very diversity that keeps it alive. The banana is a warning, sitting quietly in your kitchen, about the hidden cost of that trade. Somewhere right now, on a plantation in Latin America, workers are cutting down heavy green bunches of Cavendish bananas that will be shipped, ripened, and sold on the other side of the world within days. Somewhere, a scientist in a laboratory is studying the advancing fungus, trying to build a banana that can survive it. Somewhere, in a quiet field, the soil is already infected, the disease already spreading, invisible and patient. And somewhere, in a kitchen, maybe yours, a bunch of yellow bananas sits in a bowl, cheap and ordinary and perfect, holding not the faintest hint that it is the survivor of a fallen empire and the possible casualty of the next one. The next time you peel a banana without a second thought, remember what you are holding. A sterile clone kept alive by human hands for thousands of years, a fruit that toppled governments and gave us the phrase, "Banana Republic," the runner-up that inherited the world when its predecessor died, and a fragile miracle now racing a plague that has beaten its kind before. Not bad for something you keep in a fruit bowl. If this story surprised you, hit subscribe. The Tiny Grand tells the grand hidden history of a tiny everyday thing every week. Drop a comment telling me which everyday food or object we should uncover next. And if you learned something tonight, share this with someone who will never look at a banana the same way again.